I mean, all these things. And one of the first things they said to like the interview is like, what did you do? They're like, well, we looked at the budget, looked at where the money was going, looked at the schools that were doing well, and said, okay, they'll be all right. Whatever it is that they're doing will be okay. And then we'll redirect and reinvest more funding into the schools where folks are not performing. I mean, it sounds so simple that, I mean, it's ridiculous that even has to be like a new strategy. Like you put money where the, issues are, where people, need other support. But that's what worked. I mean, that was one thing that worked, and then the other thing that worked was they also began to really look very specifically at what was happening. So like the deputy said, she started to look specifically at the AP classes, like in the 2 or 3 schools in particular, they started to focus on. And when she would see, why this AP class is like mostly like white, even in this predominantly black school, and I see students who tested, high enough scores on the PSAT to get into these AP courses. Why are they not in them? And so she went to the school and started asking questions, and they were like, well, we require these like recommendation forms from the teachers, and she's like, that's not part of the rules. Like, all they need to do is score this, and they get access to this. Like, there's no place that says that they have to like go through all these additional hoops, right? And so she got involved and started checking the schools on their, institutional racism is what that's called. And then things started to change, right? And she started to go even to meet with students who didn't enroll in those classes, and she would come and pull you out of class and was like, why are you not in AP? I know what you got on, this or whatever, and get them into those classes, So yeah, there are those disparities, and those things don't have to be, but when there's no kind of political will to do it, they will continue to exist.
That's my question.
Sure.
So it's easy to think about, the black community as monolithic, the LGBT community as like kind of monolithic.
Right.
But also, so many people here, as well as like, we also realize that there's so many allies in this work. What are your observations on or reflections on how people who aren't necessarily who identify with both movements, but aren't necessarily labeled as that? How can straight allies, how can people who are not in color, how can they best support or get involved in these issues?
I think one of the things, I was actually this morning on a radio interview for a station up in Oakland about, and I got asked that question. I think for me, it's like, take that stuff and do that work, where you are, whatever communities you call yours, right? So, I mean, the civil rights movement and MLK were highly influenced by Gandhi and what was going on in India. That doesn't mean that they went and tried to take over the, liberation movement in India. They were like, oh, some of this stuff we could use here, right? Like they, brought it back. Similar, there have been long-standing conversations, looking at the Stanford Singing Group, between South Africa and African Americans, right? Long-standing, kind of relationships and strategies and thinking and conversations, right? To impact, and certainly by the 60s when all these countries in Africa started to, be quote unquote liberated, most of colonials still had their foot in different ways, started to be liberated, quote unquote. Also we're having conversations with Stokely Carmichael, with MLK, with all these folks, here, Robert Williams, I mean, all these people, kind of across these different borders. And so, I think that for me is the best way to figure out how to do work. I mean, I remember once, I'll post this, a friend of mine was doing a workshop on race and racism or whatever, and, this black man, this, a young white woman said to him, well, how do I get involved? He was like, if you can't talk to your own mama and daddy about race and racism, then it would be really detrimental for you to come into my community and think that you could do some work, right? I mean, and that was hard to hear, but it was, you know, true. Like, if you can't take that and work with the people who are closest to you, who drive you the most crazy, right, which are the people closest to you, it's hard to export that elsewhere. And so I think that's where it has to start, you know, and that doesn't necessarily mean like necessarily racial, but whatever community you define as yours, right? If it's the gay community, if it's whatever, like that's, you know, you can, you know, there are lessons and things to be learned, you know, from this movement and others. Thank you.
And your perspective on it and your perspective. Really integrating so much of that. Hopefully we can take this and continue to do our work here at the university and for those of us graduating the world and the communities that we enter into really incorporate this into our lives. So there is these evaluations you can fill out, you can't drop them off the door. And also Christina Young still here? She had to leave, but there's actually also some information back there at a symposium that we're holding in May on feminist theology and the return of religion following a conference that we're going to consider. So please look at that, and that was it. One more hand.